so much.
Okay, I'll try to make it short.
So,
This is something, it's going to be hard to make it short because I've been developing these ideas for about 30 years.
It's expanded over
the years.
I've come to her.
And I was thinking, oh no, Mrs. Cass is here, and she heard the expanded version already on Wednesday. So what are we going to do? So I said, we can expand it some more. But we won't make it so long. When we look deeply into Chanukah, it is something very different than we first learned when we were kids. Very different. Let's go back to the beginning. Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. That's the, yes, I'm going to be speaking about Chanukah. Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. That's Hashemayim v'Haaretz, heaven and earth. And we fast forward not too far, just one pasuk. The pasuk says, the verse says, "V'choshech al panei sahom," the darkness was on the face of the deep. V'haaretz sohu vavohu, the land was completely astonishing, bewildering, vast, empty. V'choshech al panei sahom, and darkness was on the face of the deep. Second verse in the Torah. Say our sages. There's an allusion here to the period of the Syrian Greeks, the story of Chanukah. Choshech, darkness, was on the face of the deep. The darkness alludes to the fact that the Syrian Greeks, at the during the Chanukah story, at the time of the Second Temple, this is foreshadowing what was going to happen in the Second Temple, thousands of years later. Darkness. They darkened the eyes of the Jewish people at that time. And what did they say to them? Shayu Omrim Lahem. They said to them, Kisva Keren Ashar, right on the hands of on the horn of an ox. Ein lochem chelek belokei Yisrael. If I were to ask you, what were the terrible decrees that they levied against the Jewish people? So you would say they stopped bris milah, they stopped Torah study, they stopped kviyas hachodesh, they stopped establishing the new moons. They couldn't figure out when the holidays were. There were so many harsh decrees. What decree is the darkness, symbolizes the darkness? They used to force them to write on the horn of an ox, you don't have a portion in the God of Israel. What's the big deal? Well, Rashi does explain. They were alluding to the sin of the golden calf, horn of an ox. They were alluding to the golden calf. When you Jews sinned years ago, years earlier, when you sinned with the golden calf, so then you no longer were God's people. You removed yourself from being God's people. Ein lochem chelek belokei Yisrael. But come on, this is the terrible decree. Why is this seen to be the quintessential decree? The example of darkness. Why? Let's go to the Chanukah miracle itself. The miracle of the oil. I hate to be like this. But who cares? Who cares? What's the big deal? Miracles in this religion, back in the day, were a dime a dozen. Don't be astonished that I'm saying this. There's a Mishnah that says that regularly miracles happened in the Beis HaMikdash. Regularly. The Mishnah Navo says, Asara Nisin. There were 10 miracles that happened in the temple. Now, get a load of this. One of the great miracles, not one of those 10, but there were others, and one of those great miracles was the exact same miracle that happened at Chanukah time. And I mean the exact same miracle. The Gemara tells us that the Ner Ma'aravi, the western lamp, within the candelabra there were seven branches, and the western branch remained lit all day. They would light the menorah at night. They would burn out by the next morning, except for one, every day, for 400 years, more than 400 years of the first temple. They looked at it the next morning. There was one lamp that remained every single day. The same lamp remained lit. Miraculously, they put in the same amount of oil. Now, when you're talking about the supernatural, there's no difference between 12 hours or 7 days. So the miracle of oil burning supernaturally happened for 400 years during the first temple and even in the beginning of the second temple period. When did the Chanukah story take place? Smack in the middle of the second temple. Second temple stood for 420 years, and the Chanukah story happened right in the middle of that period. So even in the beginning of the second temple, the very same miracle happened. The miracle did stop, and it stopped for some close to 200 years. But the very same miracle happened. We should be eating latkes 356 days a year. 54 days a year, excuse me. Eating latkes all day. And if you don't like latkes, eat donuts. It was great. I wouldn't look like this if we ate donuts all day, every day. So what is going on? What is a celebration? If it was a celebration of miracles, like they tell us, we'd be celebrating all day. So we have to understand a little more deeply what this celebration is all about. So I began to understand the answer to these questions when I heard the words of a Palestinian Arab in the holy city of Hebron. It was 1987. My brother, who should live and be well, was sitting in his caravan. He lived in a small enclave called Tel Rameda, Admos Yishai, right next to the graves of Rus and Yishai, the father of David. At that time there were 7, there probably still are, 7 caravans on a hill. As a matter of fact, there's a Rashi that says, isn't Hebron on a mountain? He was referring to the mountain that they live on, which overlooks the city. 7 caravans, 7 Jewish families. In that particular enclave, 55,000 Arabs. You look over and you see the city. 55,000 Arabs, 7 Jewish families. On the other side, near the Mars HaMachpelah, near the Cave of the Patriarchs, you have other Jews living. It has since then branched out quite beautifully. So there he is. It's one winter night. It's raining. You're months into the Intifada, the first Arab uprising. Cars are being stoned. Jews are dying. It was very scary times. He's sitting there, it's 10 o'clock at night, he's studying. All of a sudden there is a frantic knock on his door. He runs to the door, he opens it up. Abu Isa is standing at his door. And Abu Isa is screaming. He's frantic. My brother's standing there just watching this Arab in panic. He says, come in. He comes in, he's dripping wet, and he's screaming, and all he can make out is, come with me in the car. I need you to come with me in the car. He says to himself, you need me to come with you in the car? It's 10 o'clock at night. This is Hebron. This is the Intifada. Jews are being killed. You want me to come in the car? His intuition said, go in the car. His wife sticks his head outside the bedroom and says, Yechil, what's going on? I'm going with Abu Isa out. Where are you going? I don't know, but I'm going. She says, are you out of your mind? It'll be okay. I'm going. They get in the car. Who's this Abu Isa? Why would he go with Abu Isa? Has to be make some semblance of. Well, when the Jews came back to Hebron in 1968, after the 6-Day War, after the amazing 6-Day War, miraculous 6-Day War, the Arabs in Hebron thought it was over for them because the settlers came back. We know what happened 40 years earlier in Hebron. There was a massacre in 1929. Jews were slaughtered. The yeshiva that we're all associated with, the yeshiva that I come from, the Chavetz Chaim Yeshiva comes from the Slobodka Yeshiva of Europe that ultimately moved to Eretz Yisrael to Hebron. The Alter of Slobodka, the famed Nossos Finkel, was in Hebron before this incident happened. The yeshiva was massacred. The yeshiva was wiped out and subsequently moved to Yerushalayim. There's a Slobodka Yeshiva in Yerushalayim now. But tens and tens of boys were massacred. I think there was some between 70 and 80 people that were killed, and it was horrible. There were rapes. It went on for days. It was a horrible, horrible thing. Well, the Jews are coming back after the 6-Day War, and they're going to slaughter the Arabs in Hebron, aren't they? I mean, there's only one thing: Jews don't do that. But the Arabs think they are. So what did they do? They came running. They came running. And they say, we, or our parents, or our grandparents, 40 years ago, we saved Jews. We harbored Jews. We hid Jews. And some of them did. And it turns out that most of the stories were fabricated, but Abu Isa's family actually did. So my brother wasn't maybe not have been the smartest thing to do. He says, intuition and said, go. What was wrong with Abu Isa? What was going on? So as they're traveling, the story unfolds. Abu Isa's daughter was married to Abu Isa's cousin. And Abu Isa's daughter was unfaithful. Unfaithful meaning, in his mind, that she didn't have any boys. She only had girls. He was abusing her. He was beating her. It was very bad. She ran away. She ran away to her father's house. Illegal procedure. A wife is the property of the husband. You can't run away to the father's house. So they found Abu Isa and they beat him. And Abu Isa didn't know what the next step was. It was going to be bad. So what he wanted to do is he wanted to take his daughter and part of his family over to his brother's house on the outskirts of Hebron, and they would camp there together. They would, for the next round, they would be together. But they were nervous. He had an old car. Tires were lousy. He was afraid he would break down in the middle of Hebron. He would get stuck in the mud, something. So he was nervous. He would be easy prey for the cousins, for the clan. Be in very big trouble. So what does he do? He's going to go to a settler. He's going to go to a Jew who has a gun. The Arabs in those days, that point, didn't have guns. So he goes to a settler. The settler's carrying his Kalashnikov or his Uzi, and he's going to protect him. So okay, they go. They pick up the daughter. They go in now in two cars. My brother always says, of course, he didn't get stuck in the mud. I got stuck in the mud. We had to push it out. There we are at midnight in Hebron. We're pushing the car out of the mud. We finally get to Abu Isa's house, and I'm fast forwarding because of the hour. We finally get to Abu Isa's house. Abu Isa's brother comes out. Shalom Aleichem. They hug him. They kiss. And he says to my brother, why don't you come in? We'll have some tea. Come in and have some tea. Boy, I think I've gone as far as I'm going. But he said, you know something? I've come this far. Let's go in and shmooze. They sit down, very hospitable. They're known for the hospitality, the Arabs. And they're sitting down. They're having a beautiful shmooze. And finally he says, Yechiel says to himself, you know, I've come this far. I'm going to ask the question. He says to Abu Isa, my dear Abu Isa, do you see what just happened here tonight? This is the New York Times should be here. They should be recording this. You had a problem in your family with your cousin. You need to protect your daughter. Who did you came to? You came to the Jew. You came to the settler. You came to what the world considers to be the impediment to peace. We're the problem. And we're in the middle of an intifada. It's midnight. And what did I do? I didn't even know what you wanted, but I came to protect you. And look, we worked this out so beautifully. Is it possible that we'll ever have peace? Maybe we can have peace. So he said to him, absolutely not. Can't be. Because we believe that you Jews are damned. Because you didn't accept the prophet. You didn't accept Muhammad. And therefore it can't be. We can't have peace with you. Then he stopped. And he said, but I'll tell you the truth. I don't get that. I don't understand it. Because even before there was a Muhammad, you Jews never had peace, even before us. End of incident, end of story. That statement of Abu Isa was so insightful. I think Abu Isa understood all of history. All of history with that statement. 1 minute, you Jews had trouble. Similar trouble to that we're giving you now. You've had that throughout history. Let's go back to creation. The first two psukim, the first two verses in creation. Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. Rashi has an amazing comment on that. Bereshis, to make a long story short, Rashi interprets as Bereshis is Bishvil Reshis. He breaks down the word. And he says, the world was created, this is creation, Bishvil Reshis, because of Reshis. We open our computer and scan the word Reshis, which means first. there are three things in the Tanakh which are called rashis. So again, he breaks the word. Beis rashis. Bishvil rashis. On account of rashis. On account of these things that are called rashis, God, bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz. God created the world. On account of rashis. What's called rashis in Tanakh? Let's do our scan. Rashi comes up with number one, bing bing. What's the first thing? The Jewish people are called rashis. Rashis goyim. So the first interpretation is that it's on account of the Jewish people that God created the world. Now, slow down with that one. That's misinterpreted. Don't think that God created the world just with the Jewish people in mind, and the rest of the world, as my brother is wont to say, were mistakes in God's laboratory. No. God created all of humanity. So what does it mean that God created the world for the sake of the Jewish people? For the sake of the Jewish people that would be his emissaries to bring the entire world his message. He created the Jewish people to instill a God consciousness in the world, to teach the goodness of God to humanity. So from the very essence, from the very beginning of creation, God created a world with a cadre of people that would spread his message. My friends, that's you, and that's me. You know what the other things that are called rashis? The other things that are called rashis is the Torah. Torah, hora'ah. Also in Tanakh, the Torah is called rashis, the first. On account of the Torah, God wanted his teachings to be disseminated. His hora'ah, his teachings. The third thing is very even more difficult, because there's one of the 613 mitzvahs is bringing the first fruits, and bringing first fruits is also in the Torah called rashis. And that, Mrs. Cass, I didn't discuss on Wednesday. That's also called rashis. One out of the 613 mitzvahs. How does that work into this? I hope that we're going to get to it. Where is the most effective place from where God's word would be spread to humanity? That is the Beis HaMikdash. From the Beis HaMikdash, which is the spiritual nerve center of the entire world, the Holy Temple, that's where God's values and God's word is supposed to be spread, is supposed to be disseminated. That's the most effective place for this mission, to spread a recognition of the goodness of God, God's ways. And God provided a sign to publicize the fact that the Beis HaMikdash was this place, and the Jewish people were the source. That was the Ner Ma'aravi, that was the Western lamp that never went out. The Talmud tells us, what is this miracle? What is this miracle all about? This is so critical. The miracle of the Western lamp was to say that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rests with Israel. The divine presence rests with Israel. That miraculous light, the one light, when it was lit, that reflected the fact that the Jewish people were on top of their game. We were doing what we were supposed to do. And should we live up to our role, so then, Klal Yisrael, we would enjoy a global geopolitical and sociological setting through which the world would be able to learn our message. There would be ways that this message, through Klal Yisrael, through the Beis HaMikdash, that it would get out. However, if we didn't live up to it, if we lost our way, so then everything would fold back in on us, fold back in on the Jewish people, fold back in on the Beis HaMikdash. And there would come somebody, some other nation would come along and try to supplant us. The same group that was tasked with helping us spread the message, they would disconnect, and they would ultimately turn on us. The period in history which most beautifully illustrates this was Greece at its high point, which in a sense correlated with our people at its high point. There's an amazing Gemara. Get a load of this one. Alexander the Great conquered most of the civilized world at that time. You read a little bit about Alexander the Great, the man was incredible. And what he achieved in his short life, he died at age 32. He became emperor at age 20. What he achieved in his short life was incredible. He conquered the entire Balkans, all the way over to India. It was massive. How you can do that without modern technology and without modern arms and just without modern communication is amazing. In a short time, he took over the world. Well, there's a Gemara that talks about Alexander the Great marching on Yerushalayim. And the Jews were scared because he came in, he'd massacre the leaders. So the Kohen Gadol at that time was Shimon HaTzadik. Remember that name? Simon the Righteous. And he came out to greet, with great trepidation, to greet Alexander the Great. Alexander's coming with his army, and Shimon HaTzadik, the leader of the Jewish people, the Kohen, the high priest, a very good and holy man, he was coming out. And the Gemara tells us that when Alexander the Great saw Shimon HaTzadik, he fell off his horse and he bowed down. And the people around him are like, what on earth is going on here? This world conqueror is bowing down to this strange looking, he was in full priestly garb. He had all the garb on. If you ever seen the pictures of the Kohen Gadol, that's a picture. That is some threads, if I could say such a thing. And he bows down to him. And they're, what is going on here?
I think he saw him in a dream.
He saw him in a dream. Because so his all the people around him said, what are you doing, Alexander? What is this? He says, that man, I know that man. He says, when I go out to war before a battle, he comes to me in a dream. And he advises me on the battle. What is going on? What does this Gemara mean? What is this Gemara saying? Shimon HaTzadik is a warrior. Shimon HaTzadik was a tzaddik. Shimon HaTzadik was a priest. He was a Kohen. He's advising Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great says, I know that guy. I see him all the time. He bows down to him. His success somehow has to do with Shimon HaTzadik. Alexander the Great was a student of Aristotle. Did you know that? He was a student of Aristotle. And he was a very good student of Aristotle. He didn't let on to the fact that he believed a lot of Aristotle's philosophy.